Hi fam, Miss B here. Hope everyone's doing good. I know it's been a minute, but life is life. And I've done a couple of things in between, but now I'm getting back to this relationship little mini series. And now we're at a point where we want to talk about when you're leaning toward divorce. First and foremost, when you've gotten to the point where that's what you're thinking you want to do, I say revisit that thought because marriage is a commitment. You took yourself off the market, your spouse took themselves off the market. You said, till death do us part. Neither one of you are dead. You're still alive, which means you still need to work on it because you gave your word for better, for worse, for sickness and in health, riches and poor, all of that. That being the case, you need to work on it. Um, Slow it down. Don't just jump into it. And I won't quote scripture, but if you look at it from a biblical perspective, um, you know, you can say, well, I don't love him anymore. Well, you don't have to love him as your husband, but you have to love him as your brother or as your godly brother, if you will. You have to love him as your neighbor. And that being the case, that should be enough for you to take the time to go through all of these steps before you make that decision. Secondly, talk to your spouse first. If you've gotten to this point, then your spouse should be the first person to know. Because they could be sitting there saying to themselves, well, she's been quiet the last, month or so, not quite herself, and I'm asking her, and she's not really going into a lot of detail. So I don't know what's on her mind, but I know she likes to, when she's dealing with some things, she likes her space. So I'm going to give her space, and I'm not going to push her too hard. When she's ready, she'll come to me. And then she's sitting there thinking about getting divorced. And so, or it could be vice versa. So it was her responsibility to let her husband know that this is where her mind was. And then give him the opportunity to say, well, okay, hon, what can we do? How do we fix this? Is it fixable? Let's make the effort. Let's not just throw in the towel just because. And or vice versa. Of course, I just pick one gender, and I'll probably alternate back and forth between the genders. But that's what you want to do. You want to talk to your spouse first, and also you really don't need to be telling everybody else. That's between you two. Your marriage is between you two. No one should have been in your marriage anyway. A lot of marriages break up because people are in it, and I do plan to do a segment regarding relationships on interference, just because my first marriage survived that interference of the in-laws and moms and cousins and everybody else all up in your business. We were able to get through that. I'm in my second marriage now, and that's a struggle. But uh, I've seen other marriages destroyed because of interference from friends, family, exes, mama, cousins, whomever it may be, work, pastors. Just I've seen other marriages or long-term committed relationships fall apart because of interference. And so that's definitely something I want to talk about. So look for that video. If you subscribe to the channel, then you'll get an alert once the video, if YouTube sends out the alert like they're supposed to, you'll get the alert once the video is done and posted. But the other thing I want to tell you about talking to your spouse first and keeping everyone else out. Once you talk to someone else, they're going to ask you why. So you're going to start saying, well, he's not bringing home the same amount of money, or he's not paying me as much attention, or she's not cooking the food right, or she's lazy, she's not doing the household stuff the way she used to, or she's been nagging me. And so what happens when you guys go through all these steps and you get somewhere along the way and you decide, oh, this stuff is fixable. And you fix it and you patch everything up and y'all are on track to do better. But whomever you talk to, whoever was in your business, now they're looking at your spouse sideways because they remember the stuff that you told them about your spouse. And God forbid they don't like your spouse. If they don't like your spouse, they're not going to give you any advice to stay married. The stuff that they're going to tell you is going to most likely help push you into a divorce. If they're not happily married for many years, or they're not married at all, or they had a bad marriage and they still have their little unresolved issues, or if they want you and they're pretending to be your friend, or if they just don't like your spouse for whatever reason, they are going to say and do whatever it takes to help you into a divorce. They don't care about your commitment. They don't care about your vows. They don't care about how the kids are affected, how the budget's affected, how it's going to affect you, whether you realize it or not. All they know is they don't like your spouse, and that's their opportunity to help break it up. People just don't like other folk to be happy, period. So you definitely want to keep that in mind. Number 3, you want to seek help from qualified persons or organizations. And I recommend those to be licensed marriage and family therapists, or and everyone has someone, some old couple that they know who've been married 25, 30 years. Anyone who's been married happily 15 years or more, or 10 years or more, I'd say, would be a qualified person or qualified couple. Because chances are those qualified couples have gone through everything you're dealing with and then some. And they can tell you how they got through it. And she can take the wife in one room and tell her stuff, and he can take the guy out on the porch and they can say what they need to say, man to man, and then put you two together, help y'all talk about some stuff, and then chances are they can follow up with you. Maybe have some group date nights or whatever, just to kind of help guide you guys back to talking about whatever your issues are and see if you can't get where you need to be. The qualified person, that licensed marriage and family counselor, I've seen mixed reviews on that, but they do have training that's supposed to help with marriage therapy. Now, I will say in my first marriage, we did a counselor, I think, for like 2 sessions because we went and my husband agreed to go, but he's not the talking kind of person, so he would go and just kind of sit there, and it's like whatever I said, and they'd ask him, and he said, okay, yeah, whatever she said. So he wasn't being very open. But that was just his personality, because it takes him a while to open up to people, and so we probably would have had to go for like 6 months straight before he finally started opening up. Or I'd probably have to like say stuff attacking him before he would have responded, and that wasn't the objective, so I wasn't going to attack him. So it didn't help for us in that regard, just because of our personalities. But we were able to get help from, oddly enough, one of his relatives who was no longer married and didn't have a good marriage, but she did remember the things that were good about her marriage, and she remembered the things that weren't so good. And so she was able to guide us, and actually that helped carried us for a minute, especially early on. At that point, we weren't talking divorce. We were just trying to learn how to be married. And so she was effective in helping us to kind of get rid of our attitudes and our egos and all the other kind of stuff early on. And I remember she had to check me on some things because I just knew I was everything. And, he had to cater to me and he had to do it my way and all of that. And I got a call from his auntie and she was like, no, it ain't going down like that. You can't do that. And I was like, but he did. She said, I don't care what he did. That's your husband, and this is what you're going to do. And of course, I was raised to respect my elders, and so I said, yes, ma'am. And I took my little tail on in there, and I did what she told me to do. And bottom line, it was that he'd stayed out late, and I kind of suspected something, and so I put the chain on the door and wouldn't let him in. And so he was standing out the door begging and trying to come in, and I was like, no, go where you just came from, etc., etc. She said, no, you have all that room in that house. That's his house too. Let him come in, put him in the other room. And and I didn't even want him in the house, but I did what she said. He came in and he slept in one of the other bedrooms for I think about 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, we finally, we talked. I think, well, the first day we didn't say anything. And the second day we talked a little bit. And each day we talked a little bit more till we got to the point where we actually talked. And I was able to say how I felt. He was able to say how he felt. And we discussed it, decided what corrections we would make. And, we're back in the same room again. So that was just an example of talking to a qualified person who, um, was able to guide us in our situation. But number 4, you get rid of anything that's not conducive to the relationship or to making you or to you making a wise and thorough decision. You have to, first of all, if you've got a side piece, you have no business having a side piece if you're married. Women, men, if you are married, you have no business having a side piece, period. Unless you went into the marriage and y'all agreed to have an open marriage, you have no business having a side piece. If it's supposed to be exclusive, it's supposed to be exclusive. So the side piece needs to go, period, anyway. But here's the problem with the side piece. You've got a side piece, you can't make a wise or thorough decision about your marriage because you have someone else tying up some of your mind, some of your heart, some of your energy, some of your resources. Not your financial so much, but some of your emotional and psychological resources. They're tying it up. You've got them in the back of your mind. So you need to cut them off anyway. Because truth be told, if they laid up with you knowing you were married, they're not the kind of person you want anyway. Because you're going to get rid of your spouse. You're going to get with them. And they've showed you already what their character is. The fact that they'll lay up with you knowing you're married. So you don't even want them no way. But, and that may also mean working a whole bunch of overtime. If you can avoid it, cut back on some of the overtime and put more time into the relationship or put more time into your meditating, your thinking, and your decision-making process. If it means you played basketball with the guys every Saturday, you may have to cut that out for a few Saturdays. If it means you, I don't know, did a youth program and, there's someone else who can take it over, get someone else to take it over for a few weeks and put the time in to being able to focus on the basics, living, bathing, eating, working, of course, and then your relationship, where it is now, where it's going, where it's been, what are the possibilities, what corrections you need to make, what corrections you'd like to see in your spouse, is the relationship fixable, all those kinds of things, so that you can make a wise and thorough decision. Because the last thing you want to do is make a decision and wind up regretting it later on. And you sure don't want to spend money filing for a divorce and then y'all turn around and, reconcile. And so you just wasted money filing in the courts. And that's money y'all could have took a little weekend somewhere and, had some festivities to celebrate y'all's reconciliation. But now you can't do that because you wasted it being fast, running to the courts, filing some paperwork because you were mad. And now y'all got to wait longer to have your little weekend getaway. So think about that. Next, and one thing that would not be conducive to the relationship or making a good decision is the constant fighting. Yeah, she did what she did. She, I don't know, went through your wallet and invaded your personal space, or he cheated, or she called him out his name, all kinds of SOBs and whatever, and just went slap him off on you, or whatever the case may be. Whatever the reasons are, call the truce, because constant arguing and fighting is not conducive to a relationship. Divorced, married, no matter what. Even if it's your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, constant arguing is not conducive to anybody's relationship. So call the truce. This is where we are. And in order for us to make a right decision, we have to get rid of some of this anger and animosity. So, no fighting for the next 90 days. And in these next 90 days, we're going to work really hard on thinking, praying, meditating, whatever, float your boat while we get through to hopefully being able to make a better decision. Number 5, and this is big. Tell your ego where to go and fast. And then you're going to need to do this daily, because just the mere fact that your spouse brings up the word divorce is going to give you some kind of tension. You're going to get some kind of attitude. You're going to feel the bit of rejection. You're going to feel the depression. You're going to feel all those emotions. And then you're going to get mad. And you'll be huffing and puffing. She wants a divorce. I can do better without her anyway. She, her boobs have started to sag. I can go get me something else. Or, he thinks he's all that. I've been cooking and cleaning for him, and no, he thinks I'm going to come running, begging back to him. Get rid of the egos. Set them down, because they're not conducive to relationships. Egos, period, are not conducive to relationships, but definitely not those that are in trouble. You've got to be willing to be vulnerable. You were vulnerable enough to get into the relationship. You were vulnerable enough to make it to the point of marriage. You were vulnerable enough to give yourself wholly in intercourse with your spouse. Be vulnerable enough to put your ego away, because you're looking at a long-term decision here. Now, number 6, pull the brakes. This probably should have been number 1, but pull the brakes. Pull out all stops. Don't run down to the courthouse. Don't call your lawyer. Okay, go ahead and file. Or here's the deposit. And pull the brakes. Because truth be told, if you're really ready for divorce, once you do all these other things, you'll still be ready. But if you're not really ready, once you do all these other things, you'll know it. So, do everything you need to do. Say everything you need to say. Think everything you need to think and feel and to make it work. I think boot camps are good. Boot camps are where you can go, and it depends on how long, your budget can stand, or you being able to be off work. They have some that are just for the weekend. There are some that are like 3-4 days long. Some are full 7 days. But oftentimes you leave home. You go away, and sometimes it's just a hotel on the other side of town. But you and your spouse go stay there. You leave your home environment. You leave the memories, the tension, everything that's in the home that reminds you of the fight you had yesterday. You leave all of that out, and you go to a neutral place. Oftentimes, they have a lot of trees, a lot of greenery, a lot of nature, because that tends to ground us and bring us back down from whatever ego and emotional stuff that we're on. So, leaving the hostile environment and going to some place that's more conducive to you guys being on the same page is what you want to do. And the boot camp counselors, their experience with working with marriages that are in trouble. So they've seen it all, and they expect y'all both to come with attitudes. They expect her lips to be poked out, her hands on her hips. They expect his hands to be folded across his shoulders. Both of you have dug your heels in. That's what they expect. And they're trained to help you get through that. They're trained to help you find your issues, identify your issues, speak those truths, speak those issues to each other, so that you can get to the meat of the problems, and then help you identify whether the meat of the problem is something you can fix or something that's probably not fixable. And that's what you want. That's making a good and thorough decision. Next, you want to let an ample amount of time go by. As I said, don't just jump up and run to the courthouse. Whether it's 90 days, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year. You've done all these other things, 1 through 6. You're still going to let that extra time go by. Why? Because you want to make sure number 8 occurs, that you've got nothing else to say. You're going to think of a whole bunch of stuff. Your spouse is going to think of a whole bunch of stuff. And y'all will be saying stuff back and forth with each other. Then you got to come back and think about that stuff. You got to think about what your spouse said. Think about what you said. Think about your responses. Think about ways that you could possibly correct whatever it is the issues that your spouse brought up. So you got to come back and that means you'll have more to say. So this amount of time going by is supposed to allow you guys to be able to think of all the stuff that you need to say and be able to say them to each other in a reasonable amount of time. You're not rushing with it. You're just saying it at a leisure. You want to make sure you have no more animosity towards your spouse, no more anger, and no more hurt. So once you've gotten to the point that all of those things are out, you've got nothing, everyone has said everything that needs to be said, you don't have any more animosity, you're not mad at them anymore. The hurt is dissipated significantly. And when you get to a point where you know 10 years from now you won't have any regrets, you'll know that you made the right decision. You know you've done every single thing you can do to make the marriage work. Then that would be the one time, and I see a typo, then move in that direction. Okay, well, then move in that direction. And I see this typo here. But then you can look at moving in that direction. And I still don't recommend it. More often than not, when people have gone through all of these steps, by the time they get to number 8 and they finish saying what needs to be said, the other one's like, oh, I didn't know you felt that way. Oh, okay. And then so that opens the door for more dialogue, more communication. And before you know it, they didn't really need a divorce. They just really need to get some stuff off their chest. They needed to be able to be transparent, and they needed a safe environment to do it. And they needed to know that you are, again, a safe environment. So that's kind of my take on when you're leaning toward a divorce. I personally don't agree with it. I did it that one time. And in my second marriage, we said very clearly, we made a whole lot of promises and commitments, as you always do. But that was something we talked about very heavily, that there would be no divorce, no ifs, ands, or buts, that no matter how mad we get with each other, somebody's sleeping on the couch, we're going to make a pallet on the floor, go stay with mama, auntie, cousin, whomever, motel, something for a couple days, and work on whatever we've got to work on, because you can't keep giving yourself in marriage, and then when you get mad and you haven't handled your conflicts properly, you just want to run away and get divorced. That's just not good. And who wants to be 50, 60, 70 years old and you keep getting divorced every time you get mad at someone? No, you stay and work it through. So that's kind of my take on that when you're leaning toward divorce. But the biggies, the big biggies are slow down. No matter what's going on, slow down. Even if, and I don't usually recommend remaining in abusive relationships, but the more I talk to couples and the more I interact with couples and just, in my own life experiences, there are going to come times when someone crosses a line. And it depends on how they cross that line, whether you consider it an abusive situation or a one-time loss of temper situation. Like, for example, in my first marriage, we'd gotten into a fight. Well, not a fight, but an argument. And I jumped up in his face. Now, he's like way taller than I am, but he really, really got me. And I jumped up in his face like I'm all that, and he could have just knocked me down real quick. He didn't. But he did shove me. And I'm like, no, you put your hands on me. So I came back at him. He shoved me again. I mean, with his muscles and stuff, it didn't take but like a little push, and he just shoved me on out. And so, of course, I learned don't jump up in no man's face. But what it did tell me was, I know he had never done that before, and he never did it after that. But when we calmed down, when the argument was over, when the fight, I guess you can call it a fight, was over, we talked about it. And his thing was, you jumped up in my face. And my thing was, but you put your hands on me. And so we made an agreement. Okay, that's off limits. When we get to a point that we're like hot, 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 heated, mad with each other, that's off limits. There's a certain amount of space, and that boundary in his space I cannot cross. And with him, same thing. No matter what, no matter how close we are to each other, physical contact changes things. So, people have to learn that. You have to learn what the boundaries are. Because you're going to always say, no, the boundaries are no hitting, but, people lose their temper. And you take that into consideration. And I will say from that day to this one, my husband never put his hands on me again. But of course, we had to go through that, and that was early on in the marriage. And the argument, it was a significant argument, and he deserved to be bopped upside his head. I wasn't going to hit him, but I jumped in his face talking trash, and he just kind of pushed me on out the way like like I was a leaf. That's just how big and strong and muscular he was to my little old self. But so I say all that to say, um, there's a difference between that and the spouses being able to go to their own corners, calm down for a while, and then come back and talk about not just the issue, but how it was handled and any physical stuff that may have occurred. There's that situational where the boundaries are being established, and then there are the times when one spouse may actually be abusive toward the other, when they're repeatedly saying abusive and hurtful things, when they are withholding some basic needs from the other spouse, when they're hitting on you to a point where it's hurting you, when you have bruises, when if they're choking you, if they're withholding finances to where she's controlling all the money and you have no money, and she won't make sure you have lunch money, or if you do, you got to come to her to get it and all of that, or him, vice versa. Doesn't matter which one. She doesn't have any money, and she's constantly have to ask him for money to pay the light bill or to do this and do that, and that's abusive. That's abusive. That's controlling, and you really need to work on that. Now here's the deal: if the spouse says, "Oh, well, I wasn't aware that it was abusive," okay, well, I need to work on it, and they make the effort to work on it, they maybe look up some online help, or maybe spend time watching Dr. Phil, I don't know, or they go to a therapist or counselor or some resource to actually work on getting their point across or getting the goals met, yet by the same token not having it come across as being controlling and abusive, then that's workable. But if they say to you, no, it's not abuse, and I'm going to continue doing it, I'm okay with doing what I'm doing, and that sort of thing, then they're hurting you, and you definitely need to get out. So, that being the case, I think that's it for now. The next video in this series is going to be you're at the point of divorce. You've done all these things, and now it's time to get divorced. So, and I'll share with you, my experiences in regards to that, not just with my own situation, but in other situations as well. So I hope this is beneficial to someone. Hopefully it will save a bunch of marriages, because sometimes people get married and they're not really ready, but that's not a reason to get divorced necessarily either, because sometimes all you got to do is get ready. So it's time to start crash course time. You might have done it 6 months sooner than you should have, but guess what? With the right resources, you can get ready. Think about how many people, especially back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and prior, those shotgun weddings, neither one of them were ready to be married. They had no plans of being married at that time in their lives. But you know what? Circumstances are what they are, and Daddy showed up with a shotgun and said, "You're going to marry her and honor her." They got married, and sometimes those marriages didn't sustain, but a lot of times those marriages did sustain. But they respected each other, and they got help when they needed help. So that's all for now. I say peace. Have a good evening. Let me know what you think. Drop some comments in, like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next video where we're going to talk about you're at the point of actually getting divorced.